The legend of 80s Saturday morning kids shows has always been painted as the ultimate comfort zone. Kids in pajamas with cereal bowls piled high with sugar, silly mascots bouncing across the screen, and a TV that felt like the safest babysitter in the world. For decades, people have remembered it as a cozy ritual, harmless, goofy, and gentle. But not every cartoon played along. Plenty went off script, darker, stranger, and far too intense for young audiences. Beneath the bright colors came sorcery, invasions, body horror, and villains that still creep into memory. And that's why today we're counting down the 10 most messed up 80s Saturday morning kids shows that were never really meant for kids. Number 10, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, 1983. By the power of Grayskull. That single line hit like a lightning bolt. Transformation sequence, rippling muscles, triumphant music, and a generation froze in awe. But don't let the neon capes fool you. Eternia wasn't a playground. Skeletor's plots read like small-scale Armageddon. Enslavement schemes, occult manipulations, and threats that put entire villages on the chopping block. The series often tied its battles together with neat moral wrap-ups at the end of each episode. That little what we learned moment, while behind the scenes, every sword clash and magic blast seemed to echo down toy aisles. Kids reenacted the duels in living rooms. The plastic weapons and figures made the battles feel like they never ended. Still, the intensity didn't go unnoticed. Growing parental complaints followed a handful of episodes that leaned especially dark, the kind where skeletal sorcery or sudden peril rattled young viewers more than expected. Networks responded by trimming certain visuals, but the muscle and magic core stayed fierce enough to jolt a 7-year-old into turning on the nightlight. Despite the controversy, He-Man cemented a cultural footprint. Booming catchphrases, larger-than-life action figures, and that strange mix of moral lessons wrapped in violent fantasy. It sells nostalgia and stirs pride to this day. Number 9. Transformers, 1984. Giant machines that could fold, twist, and suddenly reveal a warrior underneath. For kids in the mid-80s, that first transformation sequence felt like watching living puzzles unfold and then blast each other to pieces. The sound effects alone were iconic. That mechanical ch-ch-ch that marked the change from truck to titan. But the show wasn't just robots clanging around. Whole story arcs carried a surprising weight. Betrayal, leadership struggles, even moments of loss. For children expecting a Saturday morning toy parade, stumbling into episodes about loyalty and sacrifice could be overwhelming. Critics at the time raised eyebrows at how much peril was packed into what was supposed to be a kid's adventure. Even toned down, the explosions were massive, the duels intense, and the threat of invasion hung heavy over entire cities. For a 7-year-old, watching a familiar yellow car suddenly get shredded in battle was enough to leave you double-checking the shadows in your bedroom. Despite the concern, the series burned itself into pop culture. The sound cues, the catchphrases, the unforgettable silhouettes of machines mid-shift. It blurred the line between toy shelf and TV screen and carved out a legacy as more than just product promotion. It was myth-making, clad in chrome and fire. Number 8. G.I. Joe, 1983. Explosions, laser fire, and dramatic roll calls. This series charged into the mid-80s like a Saturday morning battle cry. The premise was simple but irresistible. A high-tech squad facing off against a masked terror force that always had another doomsday scheme in the pipeline. Each episode opened with soldiers leaping into action, and before long, kids were shouting catchphrases while making their own living room battlefields. But beneath the flashy fights, the show leaned hard into military fantasy. Missions featured covert sabotage, biochemical weapons, and massive war machines. For children just learning multiplication tables, suddenly seeing a global terror network bent on domination could be startling. Advocacy groups at the time argued that the constant barrage of gunfire and explosions blurred the line between entertainment and violence. Even toned down, the spectacle was relentless. Aircraft screaming across skies, tanks rolling through villages, and villains threatening entire populations. Episodes often ended with moral asides about teamwork or honesty, but for a child it was usually the sight of collapsing fortresses and blazing weapons that left the deepest mark. It wasn't unusual for kids to peek through their fingers during the darker storylines. Still, the series carved a lasting identity. It gave a generation unforgettable hero archetypes, sharp one-liners, and a pulpy style of action that felt larger than life. Before we move on to the next show, please take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It's just a few clicks for you, but it truly means a lot to me. Number 7. Thundercats, 1985. Sword raised, thunder roared, and suddenly an army of feline warriors leapt across the screen. For kids of the 80s, this wasn't just another action cartoon. It was a full-on saga, blending outer space crash landings with mystical relics and bizarre mutants. The sight of Lion-O summoning the team with his glowing blade was pure adrenaline. But the show carried an eerie weight. Villains weren't simply bumbling. They were grotesque creatures led by a shape-shifting sorcerer whose decayed form and sudden transformations left kids wide-eyed. Storylines pulled from ancient curses, alien cults, and supernatural invasions. Watchdog groups at the time complained that the monstrous imagery and occult overtones pushed things too far for young audiences. Even so, the visuals burned into memory. Cracked temples collapsing under magical duels, glowing eyes piercing the darkness, warriors struggling against corruption and fear. For a child, some of these moments hit like horror sequences, slipped into a Saturday morning slot. Yet through it all, the series pulsed with excitement. Its mix of sword and sorcery tropes with futuristic battles gave it a mythic quality, and the team's unity added heart beneath the spectacle. With its bold catchphrases, surreal villains, and striking designs, the show created a lasting imprint, equal parts thrilling and unsettling, that still prowls through nostalgia today. Number 6. Voltron, Defender of the Universe. 1984. 5 pilots, 5 mechanical lions, 1 colossal robot, and when those animals fused, the spectacle felt like fingers folding into a fist that could punch a planet. The sequence itself was ritualistic, engines roaring, glowing circuitry, a luminous sword raised against a backdrop of exploding stars. For kids, it was the ultimate combination of sci-fi wonder and sheer operatic violence. But the storylines didn't stop at heroics. Episodes routinely escalated to planetary stakes, invasions, occupied worlds, and entire cities collapsing under assault. Civilians were sometimes shown fleeing, and the collateral damage read like a miniature apocalypse. Critics of the era flagged the program's steady drumbeat of destruction, wondering aloud whether animated robots should be framed amid civilian peril and mass ruin. Even with edits for broadcast, the feel of total warfare remained in many episodes. Betrayals, sacrifices, and last-second rescues that left small viewers breathless. The toy imagery only amplified the drama. Snapped-together components, roaring lions, and playsets that invited kids to stage the same heroic annihilations in miniature. And yet, underneath the spectacle, there were classic lessons of teamwork, leadership, and sacrifice. Pilots learned to trust one another even as worlds burned. For many who grew up watching, Voltron was equal parts theater and trauma, a show that taught you how big a cartoon could be and how seriously a child could feel those stakes. It still stands as one of the most monumental affecting entries in 80s Saturday morning sci-fi. And that was just part 1. 5 more weird 80s kids shows are coming in part 2. And trust me, they're even crazier. Subscribe to Soda Neck now. You don't want to miss them.